Chapter 5 The Jabberwock and the Fool, Part 2 The Infinita Venenatis Circes, or Infinite Cycle Magic, sometimes called Grey Magic, is the most powerful in all creation, the king dictated, tracing an overgrown and yellowing fingernail along the words. A loud rapping on the door stole his attention. It was the young bishop, harassing him again. "Your Majesty, are you well and decent? There's a complicated matter that I'd like to discuss with you. I really must insist that you unlatch the door and allow the company. If not for me, then perhaps for your sons. They've been very worried about you." "Never mind him, keep reading," the king's paranoia coached in his ear. "It is done via a mastery of both halves of the cycle, unifying them into a singular force," he finished, appeasing his influence. "Good, very good." It reveled maniacally. "It's exactly what we need. I can't do this. I am their king and one who rules by example. I mustn't lead them astray. I mustn't disobey the balance of power." He backpedaled, stepping away from the book to pace around the chamber haphazardly. "What choice do I have?" his alter ego inferred. "My enemies are at our gates, stalking me like prey. I can sense them, but have nary a shred of proof to sway the captain. Without his military action, I am alone. And I fear that in all I have done for this kingdom, I lack the strength to defend it," he fretted. "Do this, and I'll have it," the twin tempted. "I should have slaughtered them all, making an effigy of the corpses to demonstrate my mercilessness. Do this, and I can." By this time, the book's gravitation had seduced the king back to scour its pages for further instruction. It needs equal parts black and white. He could feel the tingle of the respective magics emanating from his hands and the brightness of their colliding. Even shielded behind his eyelids, the harshness brought discomfort. Interpreting this as being a proper start, a sprinkling's worth of focus and intensity was added to his next line, light and dark. Taking a bit more effort to keep control of his work, the king had to shout the last incantation over the growing electric droning the invocation had created, life and death. The magics manifested themselves as a levitating sphere of raw energy. As the two swirled together, they gave the illusion of success, which incited his dark personality to dare his makers, while the colors continued to meld. "Hear this, Grey Ones. Devour my essence. Judge it as you will, but let the verdict find me worthy of ascension. Grant me the power of your own, so that I may smite the unseen foes that seek retribution against the crown. Embrace me as a god-king." Unpredictably, rather than turn gray, the black magic inundated the white, swelling like a gathering storm. The surge the king wrestled with frightened him, changing his wicked cackles of triumph into screams of immeasurable torment. The magic broke free of its confines, gaining a sort of ghostly sentience. A discernible human skull floated in a cloud and lunged at him, coiling itself around his entire body. Searing pain left mouth ajar as it feasted on his flesh, stripping it clean from the bone. It asphyxiated his howling, pouring down his throat to ravage his insides. As he felt his organs blister and bleed, the demon reversed direction and exercised itself, ripping the leftover skin from his face and harvesting the last spark of life from his soul. The first king of Wonderland was helpless, dead within seconds. The chaos alerted his right hand, a fellow veteran of the war and captain of his armies, Remthos Watmir. Kicking in the door, with sword unsheathed, he watched his friend's skeleton crumple to the floor. The eel-shaped magic hovered above its handiwork, standing its ground against the intruder. Instead of fleeing at the sight of the gallant knight, ready for battle, it chose to victimize him. Repeating the previous attack, it lunged at him, swarming his body. His marrow went molten as it knocked him into a wall, disarming him. Flesh tore and blood drained as the two tussled. The knight was weakening, but surviving the same onslaught that instantly killed his liege. There was a good chance that, if left to, he'd slowly succumb to his wounds, but the magic absorbed him in its mist and raptured him through the window. The crashing glass signaled a moderate number of reinforcements, led by the bishop, who had originally gone to the captain for assistance. The king's chambers were reduced to a disaster area, while guards filed in and secured the perimeter. The bishop examined the scene for evidence of the crime. Exhibit A was the eerie cadaver he recognized as the king, only due to the crown that rested close to the skull and the tattered silks that were draped over him. Exhibit B was the book on the table. His book, one that had been missing from his library for a short period, opened to information about the Infinita Veneditus Circes. He reclaimed it, hiding it discreetly in his robes. "By the gods, what's happened here?" a soldier retched, startling him from behind. He turned back to the carcass apprehensively and said, "The stench of a sinister magic is thick in the air." "An assassination?" the soldier inquired. "I can't be certain, but it fits." He contemplated heavily. "Sir, this is Captain Watmir's sword," a different guard offered, holding it with care, "but it's the only trace we could find." The three looked at the clue, identifying that it indeed was the property of the vanished captain. Then the bishop strolled to the broken window. Looking at the sky, he spotted a peculiar black streak rocketing away from the castle. Ensuring he would stay the focal point, he blocked the view and delivered his orders. "Search the ground. If he's chasing after our assailant, he shouldn't do so alone. Oh, and don't let the boys near this. Such news had better come from me." "Of course, sir," one of the guards agreed, taking the other with him as they parted ways. Some of the men joined them on patrol. Others worked on containment and cleaning detail. Too many remained for the bishop to go unnoticed indefinitely, so he spared one last longing look outside and whispered a condolence. "I'm sorry I was too late, for both of you." Captain Watmir's kidnapper escorted him to an uninhabited sector of the kingdom's plains. At the breakneck speed by which they were traveling, he braced for a crash landing, but the magic piloted them like an ace. Dipping and rolling, it aimed for the prairie, and rather than hitting their target with a cratering impact, it gently stood him on his feet. His lower extremities still shrouded in fog, he took a few steps before subsiding to his knees, then to his stomach. His upper half seemed to be progressing through various stages of decomposition, leaving the snow-white sand in a copperish tint as it soaked up the blood trail he left as he dragged dead weight. "Where will you run, mighty Remthos? Nowhere we won't follow," a collection of male and female voices echoed from the beyond. "Please, I beg of you, let me be," he sobbed into the dirt. Sand clung to the gashes on his face, and the pulse of heavy breath moved it about. With grit in his teeth, he muttered, "Who are you, Geist? Why do you know my name?" Then, in moans of discomfort and anger, he flipped onto his back and shouted, "Show yourself." Perhaps faster than he could inhale, the pores underneath him excreted black smoke, and soon a humanoid outline with a staticky aesthetic was parallel to him in the air. "We cannot leave," they said sternly. "We are bound to you. We are you now." Paralyzing spasms struck Watmere as the apparition reached down and slowly plunged its hand into his chest. "Why are you doing this to me? Just end this. Do it. Just do it," he begged, writhing while it dug through his innards. "We cannot," the Legion replied stoically, retrieving their arm as if something in his cavity harmed them. "Your will is much stronger than the fool king's, and your warrior heart prevents us from taking you." "You can't kill me?" he wheezed, his mind hazed by the pain. "But we will make use of you," the parasite parried optimistically, scooping up its host and jetting to another location. The unforeseen teleportation landed Remthos in an environment different from his pond of blood in the sand. If he had to guess, he was somewhere in the heights of the bordering cliffs. He emerged from the portal whole and alone. The cool coarseness of the terrain he laid on extended no numbing reprieve from his agony. "What do you want with me?" he coughed, as he gingerly crawled to a cluster of rocks he could lean on. "Do you know what you are?" the voices chastised in his ear. "I'm a loyal servant to the King of Wonderland," he answered, postured on his hands and knees. "You were once, but no longer," they thundered. "The kingdom is no home to what we've made you. From this moment forth, the compatriot known as Remthos Watmere shall be made into the shadow that walks alongside its denizens in life and ferries them to death. Transcending the limitations of your mortal shell, you will be shapeless. Transcending the limitations of your station, you will be powerful. Transcending the limitations of your humanity, you will be eternal." "But why?" he wondered, propping himself up. "To better serve the balance," the multitude articulated. "Your king's flawed actions were criminal against it. It was supposed to be restored, but he merely stabilized it for his own selfish means. Under your leadership, however, this will be remedied. Darkness must return to Wonderland. The exiles must dismantle the monarchy, giving sovereignty back to the children, as intended." "It won't last," he gurgled. "There's too much animosity on either side. One wants a second chance at claiming it, and the other doesn't trust them with it. Repeating the war will only resume the hostilities until the last man, not bring a truce." "Then you will bring it to them," they levied. "You shall act as a warden and punish any signs of rebellion. No matter the side, strike them down. By your hand we will have peace. Are you up for such a task?" I am," he responded submissively. restraining his pessimism. "Then you are resurrected," they said cryptically, having the final word. When the dual occupancy disappeared from his mind, it was replaced by a sudden and rapidly escalating ache. At its most insufferable, Watmere thought his head was splitting apart, and applied counterpressure to his temples. Beneath his hand he could feel his skull cracking and breaking, the layers of scalp being stretched, as the fractured pieces of bone burrowed and stabbed their way through. The anatomy of his cranium contorted to allow for the hollow protrusions to grow into massive, tissue-covered horns. A steady stream of crimson saturated his palms, but when the ache resurfaced in his joints, they heavily contributed to the stains. He witnessed his finger bones lengthen past their tips, detaching the cuticles from their beds, while the useless skin peeled away like meatless casings. You've cursed me," he wept hysterically, barely conscious. "We've given you a crown," the throng contradicted. "Now we'll make you a king." The next unholy bout commenced and Watmere doubled over, experiencing severe abdominal contractions. Hyperventilation became the only means of staying oxygenated, but even his half-breaths were being stolen. He wasn't sure when he last noticed his heartbeat, but the one he was hearing internally didn't belong to him. It started off faint, shallow, but got stronger and more rhythmic, fueled by the burning in his lungs. Something inside was growing, awakening, alive. Coinciding with the labor-esque cramps was the horrific sensation of his penetrator clawing a path out of him. Midway through its climb, an involuntary reflex triggered to regurgitate the alien mass. On all fours, with back arched, he proceeded to heave so violently and convulsively that it broke ocular vessels, befouling the whites of his eyes with red. Then came the fetus, a cat-sized reptilian glazed in an amniotic-like fluid and bile. Similar to a salamander, it cascaded to the ground, shaking the excess ooze off its infantile wings. A fluffy down hung in the place where feathers would grow in adulthood, just as it would eventually have a beautiful combination of crest and horns that, for now, were a grouping of bumps and nubbins. Locking him in its 6 blue eyes, which needed growing into, it let out an airy caw as a greeting to its newly imprinted parent. "What hellspawn is this?" Watmere quailed, still spewing liquid. "She is a miracle of the cycle, your offspring. She will raise you an army, the likes of which the world has yet to see," the unseen advised. "Time is of the essence, but both of you need rest now. She must mature, and your injuries heal. Of this we are weary. The bishop needs someone to blame for the murder of the king, and will pin it on you, making you an enemy of the state. It won't be long until he picks up the trail that will lead him here, but you are too vulnerable for such a threat. Neither of you can afford discovery. We suggest you find a pawn to play against him, a spy to sit at his table, someone to be your sanctuary until you're ready. I believe I know where I can find one," he ruminated, enticing his seed to come closer. Days later, the bishop orchestrated His Majesty's funeral, carefully selecting knights according to rank as pallbearers. The procession sent out for one of the king's favorite places in his entire kingdom, the Pool of Tears. It would take them weeks to journey there, especially without the aid of looking-glasses, as they would be too hazardous to carry a stone replica coffin through. The public was a complication as well. Unbelievable numbers congregated to pay their respects, walking alongside the strictly uniform double-file line as far as they could, and throwing flowers in the road. Night brought base camps beneath Wonderland's stars. The sights, sounds, and smells of such untamed wilderness were a rarity for children raised in the castle. Prince Club laid awake, wishing they would enthrall him the way they had his brother, Diamond. But to him, every creak and rustle felt accentuated, a sign of a looming boogeyman pacing at the edges of his field of vision. They chose to bury the king on a grassy overhang with a panoramic vantage of the landmark waterfall that replenished the pool as it fed its conjoined stream. The rich colors of twilight shimmering on the surface of the water was the kind of view you could get used to. A eulogy was given by candlelight, worthy of the mural erected as a headstone. Carvings of servicemen and civilians alike reached down in both worship and mourning, beginning the watch over his sarcophagus for time immemorial. "We've done all we can for him in this realm, boys," the bishop said at the end of his officiation. "We should return to camp and leave your father to his peace." "Actually, I'd like to stay a little longer if I could," Prince Club spoke up, hoping for consent. "Are you all right, brother?" Prince Diamond sniffled, erasing a tear from his cheek. "I will be," he replied, putting him in a side hug. "There's just so much I've left unsaid. So many questions I never asked, advice he hadn't given. But it's not too late to have one last conversation, man to man." "King to king," Diamond restated warmly, elbowing him gamesomely. "I'll order the sentries to keep their posts and escort you back when you're finished." The bishop re-entered, effectively ending their fraternal moment. "That won't be necessary. I think I'll be spending the night here," Club addressed, turning to face him. "I acknowledge you are grieving and hungry for closure, young Majesty, but I must stress that it may not be wise to remain in the open alone," the bishop responded, humbly encouraging reconsideration. If an emergency happens out here, we know where to find each other. Otherwise, I'll be back in time to assist with packing the camp for the venture home," he stubbornly drove his point. Little did the bishop know when he bowed and stepped away, taking Diamond down the incline, and the sentinels with them. This had nothing to do with emotions of any ilk. Club was setting a trap in which he was the bait. He speedily gathered bedding materials to improve an observation position and hunkered behind large boulders that encompassed the gravesite. Club's light slumber was jarred by an injection of adrenaline. His hyper-awareness had activated him. But his brain was bleary as to where he was and how much time had gone by. Dawn was breaking, and there was movement on the other side of his oasis. Sweat building on his brow, he fought dew for the footing to push himself flush against his camouflage. Slowly he lifted his eyes to identify the target he'd been waiting to ambush. The wicks of the candles were chewed, and weak flickers were melting the wax, but you could see a hooded man knelt at the foot of the king's coffin. Though his words were inaudible, he appeared to be entranced in meditation or prayer. Armed with only a stick or rock, if he chose it, and whatever budding authority a prince destined for the throne had, Club stealthily advanced to cinch the snare. "So you're who has been on our heels since we crossed the desert. I knew I wasn't going mad." Undaunted, the hooding man met the surprise with a patronizing chuckle. "Your instincts are as keen as your father's." "Who are you, stranger? What business do you have here?" Club requested threateningly. "No Wonderlander should be a stranger to you," he stated relaxedly. "I am just one of the thousands who wish to say their goodbyes, and one who's asking forgiveness." Club hung himself on the word forgiveness, and was tongue-tied at the unlikelihood, the sheer impossibility, of who he was talking to. "Captain, is that you?" "What's left of me," he replied frailly, coming off his knees. "The garrison thought you were dead. We all did," Club blissfully told him. "Maybe the better part of me is," he retorted pessimistically, pivoting toward the prince. "Well, this is fantastic," he exclaimed, unsettled by the captain's unworldly eyes. "Have you brought news of the assassin? We should report it to the bishop." "No," Watmere snapped, minimizing his avidity. "There never was an assassin, son." "What? Of course there is," he stuttered in certitude. "The bishop told us. He found evidence." "Did he show you?" the captain questioned. "No, but—" The prince was reeling. What the bishop has told you is part of an intricately weaved web of false narrative, and if you inform him I'm here, I'll face the sword," he expounded. "Because it's you, isn't it? You're the Dark Terror, sorcerer of death. The Black Scourge he forewarned of," Club accused. "He described someone to you?" the captain asked, baffled with intrigue. How was this possible? Had there been a prophecy? "I don't know. He didn't have the book. He just told us, advised us, as he'd done father," he recollected uncomfortably. "Look through the keyhole, and you can see a marionette dance, but miss the puppeteer pulling the strings behind the door," Watmere smirked, having sleuthed the blueprint to the bishop's game. Oh, what truths all of his ugly secrets could unlock. "What truths?" he barked with growing distress. "What secrets?" "There are reasons to believe he knows more than he's sharing about the true nature of the king's death, and the party he's told you is responsible," he testified. "I have reasons to believe there is no assassin, and he died at the hands of grey magic." Trembling in anger, the prince retaliated against his assertion with an ignited passion. "Enough of this. No more talking in riddles, spouting heresy. I see now your true intentions for coming here, to twist my mind against our esteemed caregiver and slander father's character, while the dirt is still fresh on top of him, you filthy lying blackguard. Despite not being fully recovered, Watmere disciplined his ignorance by teleporting, seizing him by the throat and forcefully pinning him to the mural wall. As Club's head snapped back, the dying lights were reanimated to be bright open flames, perfect spotlights for displaying what lay repressed under the captain's hood, manipulating his form so that his horns could remanifest. He reprimanded through gnashed teeth. "Do I look like a lie, boy? I was there to not only witness what your father's error cost him, I felt it. The same magic that killed him came for me. And had I been fortunate, I'd be right here, growing cold next to him." "What in Wonderhaven's name are you?" Club gasped, ripping at his claws to get free. "I am his consequence, the hand of the gods that must cleanse the balance of the havoc wreaked upon it by his reign," he responded, promptly releasing him and stepping away. "Because of the exiled ones, right? The balance needs death magic." "You're bringing them home, aren't you?" he questioned hoarsely, falling to his feet while rubbing his neck. "Nothing so innocent," the captain answered regretfully. "It will be a war that will destroy all that you love, and that's why I've come humbly seeking your help." "What is it you want of me?" the prince's voice cracked. "You must refuse your birthright to the throne. Defer it to Prince Diamond in favor of your own fortress close to me. This front will be our direct line to His Highness and his vulture. You will be positioned with their logistics openly laid in your lap. You will control them." He concocted. "You're requesting that I decline my place within the bloodline just to have my brother undeservedly die in the mantle. You ask too much," he spurned. "I ask no more than a king ought to be able to bear," Watmere veered. "I'm not king yet," Club denied. "But you will be," he preached, "and I implore you to consider the selfishness I implore you to consider what selfishness has done to your kingdom, its future. And if that doesn't do it, consider your future. You are every bit the man your father raised you to be, and will be a great king. But nothing he left you is sincerely yours, not with a sibling watching over your shoulder, resenting you, waiting for your death so that you can be replaced and forgotten, unraveling the empire you've built." "What else can you offer?" the prince asked, probing for further incentive. "Do this for me, and I will make you my apprentice," he added, cueing the needed sweetener. "I gift you my tutelage, my power, and whatever they earn you, no one can threaten." "All right, my word is my bond. You'll have your support," he accepted, sealing their partnership. "Your word is worthless to me, boy," the captain hissed. "It's your allegiance I want. You must pledge yourself to me, here, at the feet of your father. Show him, let him see the pact his firstborn makes to carve his own destiny out of his family's." The prince's pride found it degrading, kneeling to someone who otherwise would grovel before him, but he did it all the same, saying, "Ancestors is my judge. I pledge my services until my freedom or life's end to you, my lord." Arise now and return to the castle, Watmere sighed in perverse satisfaction. Convince those cretins to blind themselves, and corner the bishop with the prophecy. It will corroborate your worst fears, but it's imperative that the sons learn of it. I agree, sire, but he is an old man, very staunch to his duties. I'm doubtful that some outrageous ramblings and nagging will open that book, he objected in a passive tone. Well, then we'll just have to find a way to force his hand, won't we? The captain alluded fiendishly. I remember when he came back to camp that morning, the King of Diamonds told his daughters, still engrossed in the memories. I grieved for your grandfather in private. I cried myself out of tears, so I was exhausted but not soundly asleep. There was so much noise, so much panic. When I finally got a look at him, he was drained of color and covered in blood. At first the bishop couldn't get much out of him, but he gradually grew hysterical. He said he encountered a being claiming to be Captain Remthos, but hideously deformed, and as a message, he was attacked by a creature we'd later christen the Jabberwock. He then got belligerent about some prophecy he swore the bishop was hiding, a truth about father he and I deserved to know. I, of course, had no idea where his rant was heading, but while tending to your uncle's injuries, the bishop brought his charges to light, making them clear. He told us the man he saw was Remthos, and there had indeed been a prophecy that mapped our future. He talked about the king turning against the balance of power and how a great evil would spring from his transgression. Given his illness, his fragile mental state, the bishop had to handle the issue sensitively to dissuade any episodes of rashness. So, he held his tongue, observed, and when he noticed that a book on grey magic had been removed from his study, he saw that the dominoes were falling. He knew there was no stopping it, but he thought if he could just speak to father, petition to his lucidity, he might prolong the events, but he couldn't. He had his reasons for not involving us boys, too. For one, to save us the humiliation of the king's disgrace, but as successors, he needed to keep us focused on our enemy. He thought us discovering who it really was would hinder our crucial action and cause hesitation. This news created tension for our travels home. We were rather reserved, but I could tell your uncle was wrestling with thoughts, troubled by them. He eventually worked up to calling a meeting to tell the bishop and I he didn't want to be king. He was adamant about passing down the right. He also felt strongly that the best course for us was to split the kingdom of Wonderland in two. The bishop arraigned how unorthodox his requests were, but I gave them my vote. I took it as him being the protective older brother, wanting to put himself in harm's way first. But anyway, that's how Blacksuit came to watch the wall. So, grandfather, our family is responsible for all of this. Red simplified under a stiffened brow. The Jabberwock king is a close friend. White followed, organizing her own epiphanies. And you knew it, her sister added, firing daggers at their father. Yes, he fielded, owning his faults. It's as the bishop dreaded. my knowledge has contributed to the bleak situation we're in. What situation? Red asked in deepening disappointment. He is coming, he hardened as he exulted. We've anticipated it for many years, and as long I have waited for a clear way to end our long-standing feud, his hatred for us. When it's over, things will be different. They will be wonderful once more, but your mother and I won't be here. The final act of my reign will be to coronate you as the new queen. It's not the way I wished it, but it's what the Grey Ones have decreed. An instant later, a heartbroken wight took off running to the queen, shouting, "Mommy, no!" She had been present on the floor of the room, comfortably cuddled by bandersnatches on all sides. Catching White in her arms, she did all she could to appear strong for her, but the tighter she hugged, the harder it was. "Oh, my baby, it'll be all right," she giggled, as she too wept. Red had moved too. Now standing, she fought to keep the scowl on her face from turning soft. She wanted more than anything, at that moment, to look at the king with the purest anger, but instead found herself wrapped around his neck. "I'll be a tenacious queen. I won't let you die," she sobbed. "That's my girl. I know you will," he replied with hushed sniffles, scooping her up and carrying her over to the spot on the floor where his family would huddle the rest of the night and cry together. That's gonna wrap this episode up for you, for us guys. We made it through it, a real long one, but I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you in the next one.